The dust of Willow Creek settled on Willow Lawson's boots as she marched down the main street, chin held high despite the whispers that followed her like hungry wolves. It was 1878, and in this dusty corner of Arizona territory, a woman with no husband, a tarnished reputation, and a rifle she knew how to use was nothing short of the devil's own handmaiden. "There she goes again," came the predictable mutter from Mrs. Holloway outside the general store. "Town trouble, mark my words." Willow didn't break stride. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she headed toward Hammond's general store with her basket of herbs. Her small apothecary business barely kept her cabin maintained, but it was honest work despite what the gossips said. "Mr. Hammond," she called as she entered the store, the little bell above the door announcing her arrival. The shopkeeper's smile tightened at the sight of her. "Miss Lawson." He nodded curtly. "What can I do for you today?" "I've brought the tinctures Mrs. Campbell ordered for her rheumatism." Willow placed 3 small amber bottles on the counter. "And the salve for the baker boy's rash." Hammond took the bottles without meeting her eyes. "I'll see they get them. I also need flour and sugar, if you'd be so kind." Willow counted out her coins, aware of the silence that had fallen over the other patrons. The store's door opened again, bringing with it a shaft of golden light and the tall silhouette of a man Willow had never seen before. He wore a dusty hat pulled low over his eyes, and despite the heat, a bandana covered his neck. His clothes were trail-worn but of good quality. A cowboy, by the looks of him, but not the rowdy sort that passed through town looking for whiskey and women. He nodded politely as he entered, then moved to the far corner of the store, examining a display of work gloves. Hammond returned with Willow's supplies. "That'll be all, Miss Lawson," he said, louder than necessary. Willow stiffened. "I haven't paid for the coffee yet." "We're out," Hammond said flatly. "Your shelf suggests otherwise." Willow pointed to the row of coffee tins clearly visible. "Spoken for." Hammond's eyes darted to the side. The stranger in the corner looked up, his gaze settling on Willow. She felt her cheeks flush under his scrutiny, and she turned back to Hammond. "Very well. Another time, perhaps." She gathered her purchases with as much dignity as she could muster and headed for the door. "Miss," the stranger's deep voice stopped her. "I believe I've ordered more coffee than I need." He approached the counter with measured steps. "Mr. Hammond, would you sell this lady what she requires from my allocation? I can make do with less." Hammond's face reddened. "Now see here, Mr. Keller, Zachary Keller," the man said, extending his hand to Willow. "Just arrived to help at the Carson Ranch." Willow hesitated before taking his hand. "Willow Lawson." "I know who she is," Hammond cut in. "And if you're working for Carson, you'd do well to steer clear." Zachary's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. "I'll decide who I steer clear of, Mr. Hammond." "The coffee, if you please." The store fell silent as Hammond grudgingly measured out the coffee beans. Willow couldn't look away from the stranger, this Zachary Keller, who had so casually defied the unspoken rules of Willow Creek. When Hammond handed her the package, she quietly thanked him and turned to Zachary. "Thank you, Mr. Keller." He tipped his hat. "Madam." She left quickly, feeling the weight of stares on her back. Outside, she paused to adjust her basket, startled when Zachary emerged from the store moments later. "May I walk with you, Miss Lawson?" he asked, his voice as quiet as the desert at dawn. "That wouldn't be wise, Mr. Keller. Your reputation in town is still unmarked." A slight smile crossed his face. "I've never put much stock in other people's opinions." "Then you're either very brave or very foolish." Willow started walking. Zachary fell into step beside her. "I've been called both, usually by the same people." Despite herself, Willow smiled. It had been a long time since anyone in Willow Creek had willingly walked at her side in broad daylight. "What brings you to our little town?" she asked, curiosity getting the better of her. "Carson needs help with his cattle. I've got experience and was passing through." His answers were simple, direct. "I heard he's a fair man." "He is," Willow confirmed. "One of the few." They walked in silence for a moment before Zachary spoke again. "Would you mind telling me why everyone in that store looked at you like you were carrying the plague?" Willow's step faltered. "You're direct, Mr. Keller. Life's too short for dancing around truths." She considered him, this tall, quiet man with eyes that seemed to look straight through the walls she'd carefully built. "The short version? I arrived here 3 years ago alone." I have knowledge of healing herbs and medicines that some folks call witchcraft. I speak my mind when perhaps a lady shouldn't. And, she hesitated, there was an incident with the former sheriff's son. Zachary didn't press for details, which surprised her. Most men would have demanded the full story, eager for scandal. People fear what they don't understand, he said simply. They had reached the edge of town where the main street gave way to a dirt path leading toward Willow's small cabin on the outskirts. This is where we part ways, Mr. Keller. Thank you for your kindness today. He nodded, studying her face. Miss Lawson, I've known good people and bad across 15 states and territories. I've found rumors rarely tell the whole story. His eyes, clear and direct, met hers. I see the woman behind the rumors, and she seems worth knowing. With that, he tipped his hat and turned, walking back toward town, leaving Willow staring after him with a strange fluttering in her chest she hadn't felt in years. Zachary Keller settled into life at the Carson Ranch with the quiet efficiency that had served him well throughout his 30 years. Carson was indeed fair, if gruff, and the work was honest. Over the following weeks, Zachary learned the rhythms of the ranch and the boundaries of Willow Creek, both geographical and social. He heard the whispers about Willow Lawson that she'd bewitched men with more than her beauty, that she'd caused the death of Thomas Ryder, the previous sheriff's son, that she dabbled in dark arts from her solitary cabin. The stories varied with each telling, growing more outlandish as the whiskey flowed in the saloon. Zachary listened, but made no comment. He'd learned long ago that silence was often more revealing than questions. 3 weeks after his arrival, a young ranch hand named Billy came to him clutching his arm, face pale with pain. Got caught in the fence, Billy explained through gritted teeth. Tore me up good. The wound was deep, already showing signs of infection. Carson's wife did what she could, cleaning it with whiskey and bandaging it tight. But by morning, Billy was feverish and the wound smelled foul. Boy needs a doctor, Carson said grimly. Nearest one's 2 days' ride. What about Miss Lawson? Zachary suggested, thinking of her herbal remedies. Carson's face darkened. That woman is a healer, Zachary finished firmly. Billy might not have 2 days. Carson studied him, then nodded reluctantly. Your call, Keller. But you'll be the one to fetch her. The ride to Willow's cabin took less than an hour. The small structure stood in a clearing surrounded by desert sage and juniper. A neat garden of herbs and vegetables grew alongside, testament to careful tending despite the harsh conditions. Zachary dismounted and approached the door, removing his hat as he knocked. Willow opened the door, surprise registering on her face before she composed herself. Mr. Keller. Miss Lawson. We have a situation at Carson's. A boy with a bad wound, turning septic. I was hoping you might help. Something flashed in her eyes: wariness, resignation, and beneath it all, determination. Let me gather my supplies. She disappeared inside, emerging minutes later with a leather satchel. Without a word, she secured it to her horse, a sturdy paint mare that stood ready in the small corral beside her cabin. They rode in companionable silence until Willow finally spoke. Carson sent you? Reluctantly. She nodded, understanding the unspoken. And the boy? Billy Davis. 17. Arm caught in barbed wire. Good kid. I'll do what I can, she said softly. But you should know, Mr. Keller, that if things go badly, it won't be the fence they blame. Zachary glanced at her profile, strong and proud against the vast Arizona sky. Is that what happened with Thomas Ryder? Willow's hands tightened on the reins. Yes. He had consumption. His father brought him to me after the doctors gave up. I told them I couldn't cure such a disease, only ease his passing. When he died, Sheriff Ryder told everyone I'd poisoned him. And they believed it. People believe what's convenient, Mr. Keller. When they arrived at the ranch, Carson met them in the yard, his expression guarded. Miss Lawson. Mr. Carson. Where's the boy? Carson led them to the bunkhouse where Billy lay sweating on his cot, the other ranch hands giving them a wide berth. Willow knelt beside him, unwrapping the bandage with gentle hands. She examined the angry red wound, her face revealing nothing. I need hot water, clean cloth, and a knife heated in fire until it glows, she said, opening her satchel. And whiskey for him and the wound. Carson nodded to one of the men, who hurried to comply. Willow mixed herbs from various pouches, creating a paste that filled the room with a pungent aroma. "This will hurt," she warned Billy. "The infection must be cut away." The boy nodded weakly. Zachary stepped forward. "I'll hold him." The next hour was grim. Billy screamed when Willow cut into the infected flesh, then passed out from the pain and whiskey. She worked methodically, removing dead tissue, cleaning the wound with a solution from her satchel, then applying her herbal paste before wrapping it in clean bandages. "The fever should break by morning if the infection is contained," she told Carson. "He'll need this tea every few hours, and the bandage changed twice daily with fresh paste." She handed him a small pouch. "If he worsens, send for me immediately." Carson nodded, a new respect in his eyes. "Thank you, Miss Lawson." As Zachary walked Willow to her horse, the ranch hands watched from a distance, their expressions a mix of fear and grudging respect. "They still think I'm a witch," Willow said quietly. "Just one who might have saved their friend." "It's a start," Zachary replied. Before she mounted, Willow turned to him. "Why did you come for me today, Mr. Keller? You barely know me." Zachary considered his words carefully. "I've learned to trust my instincts about people, Miss Lawson. Mine tell me you're a woman of honor, regardless of what others say." Something vulnerable flickered across her face before she masked it. "You may be the only one in Willow Creek who thinks so. Then Willow Creek is full of fools." The words came out more fiercely than he'd intended. Willow studied him for a long moment. "Good night, Mr. Keller." "Zachary," he corrected. Friends should use first names. A smile touched her lips. "Good night, Zachary." "Good night, Willow." He watched her ride away, silhouetted against the setting sun, and felt something settle in his chest, a certainty he couldn't yet name. Billy recovered, slowly at first, then with gathering strength. By the end of the week, he was sitting up, telling exaggerated tales of his brush with death. The infection had cleared completely, leaving only a scar that would fade with time. Word spread through Willow Creek about the miracle healing. Some attributed it to God's grace or Carson's wife's care. Others reluctantly acknowledged Miss Lawson's skill. A few brave souls even ventured to her cabin for remedies for their own ailments. Zachary made a point of stopping by her cabin every few days, sometimes with supplies from town, sometimes just to talk. Their conversations ranged from the practicalities of desert survival to philosophy, literature, and their pasts. He learned she'd been raised by her grandmother in St. Louis, a woman who had passed down generations of healing knowledge. After her grandmother's death, Willow had come west, seeking a place to practice her skills where women had more freedom. He told her about his years driving cattle across the plains, about losing his parents to influenza when he was 20, about his dream of someday having his own small spread with enough cattle to live comfortably. Summer ripened into early fall, bringing slightly cooler days. One evening, as they sat on Willow's porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Zachary finally asked the question that had been on his mind. What really happened with Thomas Ryder? Willow's hands stilled in her lap. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the chirping of crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. "He was in love with me," she finally said, her voice soft. "Or thought he was. I was new in town, different from the girls he knew. His father, the sheriff, disapproved. When Thomas fell ill, I was the last resort." She looked out at the darkening landscape. "He was dying when they brought him to me. I told them so, but Sheriff Ryder insisted I try everything. In his last days, Thomas became delirious. He spoke of our future together, of children we would have." Her voice caught. I played along to comfort him. It was cruel not to. Zachary waited, sensing there was more. After he died, Sheriff Ryder came to my cabin in a rage. He'd found letters Thomas had written to me, letters I never received because they were never sent. Love letters. Proposals. She met Zachary's eyes. He accused me of leading his son on, of breaking his heart, and then poisoning him when he wouldn't give me his name. "That's why people shun you." Willow nodded. "The sheriff made sure everyone believed his version. He would have run me out of town, but Mayor Bennett stopped him. My salves had saved his wife's hands from burning after a cooking accident." "And Ryder?" Zachary asked. "Where is he now?" "Died last spring. Heart failure." A bitter smile curved her lips. "Some said it was my curse finally catching up to him." Zachary reached across the space between them and took her hand. It was the first time he had touched her since that day in Hammond's store. "I'm sorry," he said simply. Willow's fingers tightened around his. It's been a lonely 3 years. You're not alone anymore. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing since that first encounter. Zachary leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question asked and answered in the gathering darkness. When they parted, Willow's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. You should know what you're risking, she whispered. Being with me won't be easy. Zachary brushed a strand of hair from her face. Nothing worthwhile ever is. 2 days later, Zachary rode into town for supplies and heard the whispers following him. News traveled fast in small towns, and someone had seen him at Willow's cabin. He ignored the stares, completing his errands with the same quiet efficiency he brought to everything. As he loaded supplies onto his horse, Sheriff Davis Ryder's replacement and no relation to young Billy approached him. Keller, the sheriff acknowledged. Got a minute? Zachary secured his packages before turning. Sheriff. Davis was a solid man in his 40s, fair but cautious. Heard you've been spending time with the Lawson woman. I have. You know her reputation in this town. I know what people say. Zachary's voice remained level. I make my own judgments. Davis studied him. Carson says you're a good worker. Reliable. Not the sort to make trouble. I'm not looking for trouble, Sheriff. Sometimes trouble finds you anyway. Davis sighed. Look, I've got no personal quarrel with Miss Lawson. But this town has a long memory, and old Sheriff Ryder had a lot of friends. Are you warning me off, Sheriff? I'm suggesting discretion. Davis adjusted his hat. For both your sakes. Zachary finished tying down his supplies. Appreciate your concern. But I've never been one for hiding my intentions. And what exactly are your intentions, Keller? Zachary mounted his horse and looked down at the sheriff. Honorable ones. With that, he turned and rode toward the ranch, leaving Davis shaking his head in the dusty street. That evening, Zachary approached Carson after supper. The rancher was sitting on his porch, smoking a pipe as the day's heat dissipated. Something on your mind, Keller? Carson asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Wanted to be straightforward with you, sir. I'm courting Willow Lawson. Carson took a long draw on his pipe. Figured as much. That why Sheriff Davis came by earlier. Zachary hadn't known about the sheriff's visit. Likely. He thinks you're stirring up old troubles. I think old troubles need airing out sometimes. Carson studied him. Boyd died in her care. That's a fact. Boys die in doctors' care too. That's also a fact. A ghost of a smile touched Carson's weathered face. You're set on this course? I am. Then you should know there's talk of running her out of town again. Ryder's old friends don't like seeing her reputation rehabilitated, especially now that she's getting more business. Zachary's jaw tightened. Who's leading this talk? Hammond. Holloway. The usual choir. Carson tapped his pipe against the porch rail. You planning on staying in Willow Creek long term? The question caught Zachary off guard. Hadn't decided. Well, decide soon. That woman stood alone too long to be left that way again. The implied challenge was clear. Carson might not approve of Willow, but he respected Zachary enough to speak plainly. I don't abandon people I care about, Zachary said firmly. Carson nodded. See that you don't. The following Sunday, Zachary did something that set all of Willow Creek talking. He escorted Willow Lawson to church. They arrived early, sitting in the back pew as the church filled. The whispers rose like a swarm of locusts as people noticed them. Pastor Miller, to his credit, made a point of welcoming Willow, though his handshake was brief. The service proceeded normally until the prayer requests. I'd like to thank Miss Lawson, came a voice from the middle of the congregation. It was Mrs. Jenkins, a widow whose arthritis had kept her housebound for months. Her liniment has been the only thing to ease my joints. I can hold my grandchildren again. A shocked silence followed, broken by Billy Davis's mother. And we're grateful for saving our boy's arm. Doctor from Phoenix said he'd have lost it for certain without her quick work. The dam broke. 3 more people spoke up about Willow's remedies helping their ailments. Hammond and his wife sat stiffly, their disapproval radiating through the church. But the tide had shifted, if only slightly. After the service, Zachary and Willow walked slowly through town toward her cabin. People still stared, but a few nodded in greeting. That was brave, Willow said quietly. Coming to church with me. It wasn't bravery. It was truth. She stopped, turning to face him. Zachary, what are we doing? He took her hands in his, not caring who saw. I'm falling in love with you, Willow Lawson. And I think you might be falling in love with me too. Her eyes widened, vulnerability and hope warring in their depths. It won't be easy. You said that before. It bears repeating. But a smile tugged at her lips. I'm a patient man. He squeezed her hands. And a stubborn one. I've noticed. She glanced around at the townsfolk watching them from a distance. They'll never fully accept me. Maybe not all of them. But some already are. The rest will come around, or they won't. Either way, we'll manage. We. She repeated softly, as if testing the word. Yes, we. He lifted her hand to his lips. If you'll have me. The week that followed was one of contrasts. More people came to Willow for remedies, emboldened by the church testimonials. Yet Hammond refused to stock her tinctures in his store, and Mrs. Holloway crossed the street rather than pass her on the boardwalk. Zachary continued his work at the ranch, but made no secret of his evening visits to Willow's cabin. The ranch hands teased him good-naturedly, but there was respect in their eyes. Billy Davis in particular became something of an advocate, telling anyone who would listen how Willow had saved his arm. On Saturday night, Zachary took Willow to dinner at the hotel restaurant, the first time she had dined in town since the scandal. The proprietor, Mr. Patterson, welcomed them politely, though he seated them in the corner away from other diners. As they finished their meal, the door burst open and 3 men entered, already drunk from the saloon across the street. Hammond was among them, along with 2 of Ryder's old deputies. Well, look who's putting on airs, Hammond slurred, pointing at their table. The witch and her protector. Zachary rose slowly. Evening, Hammond. You've had a lot to drink. Might be time to head home. Don't tell me what to do, Cowboy. Hammond staggered forward. You come to our town, start taking up with this. This murderess. Who do you think you are? The restaurant had gone silent. Patterson stepped forward. Take it outside, gentlemen. This is a respectable establishment. Respectable? Hammond laughed. Nothing respectable about entertaining a woman who bewitches men and poisons them. Willow stood, her face pale but composed. Mr. Hammond, I've never harmed anyone intentionally in my life. Your quarrel with me is based on lies. Thomas Ryder's dead because of you, one of the deputies shouted. Thomas Ryder died of consumption, Zachary said evenly. Something no doctor or healer could cure. That's not what Sheriff Ryder said, Hammond insisted. Sheriff Ryder was a grieving father looking for someone to blame, Zachary countered. And you all were too willing to believe the worst. Hammond lunged forward suddenly, grabbing Willow's arm. You'll leave this town if you know what's good for you, witch. Zachary moved with surprising speed for such a quiet man. He caught Hammond's wrist in a grip that made the storekeeper wince. Let her go. His voice was soft, dangerous. Now. Hammond released Willow, but his face twisted with rage. You're making a big mistake, Keller. The only mistake was letting this town persecute an innocent woman for 3 years. Zachary didn't raise his voice, but it carried through the silent room. It ends tonight. One of the deputies reached for his gun, but Sheriff Davis chose that moment to enter the restaurant. He took in the scene with a practiced eye. Problem here, folks? No problem, Sheriff, Zachary said, not taking his eyes off Hammond. These gentlemen were just leaving. Davis looked from Hammond to Zachary to Willow. That right, Hammond? Hammond glared but nodded grudgingly. For now. He turned to go, then looked back at Willow. This isn't over, Lawson. After they left, Davis approached their table. Miss Lawson. Keller. He nodded to each of them. Might I suggest I escort you both home? Tensions are running high tonight. The walk to Willow's cabin was tense, with Davis ranging ahead to ensure no ambushes lay in wait. When they arrived, the sheriff tipped his hat. I'll keep an eye out tonight. Don't expect trouble, but better safe than sorry. Thank you, Sheriff, Willow said quietly. After Davis left, Zachary turned to Willow. Pack a bag. She blinked. What? Just for a few days. I'm taking you to Carson's. It's safer. I can't leave my home because of threats, she protested. It's not running away, Zachary assured her. It's being strategic. Carson's ranch has more people, more protection. Hammond and his friends will cool off, and we'll figure out our next steps. Willow studied his face. Our next steps. Zachary took her hands. Willow, I meant what I said before. I'm falling in love with you, no? I've fallen in love with you. I want a future with you, whether it's here or somewhere else. But I need you safe while we decide. Tears welled in her eyes. I've been alone so long, I don't know how to trust this. He brushed his thumb across her cheek. Then let me prove it to you. Every day. She leaned into his touch. I love you too, Zachary. I think I have since you stood up for me in Hammond's store. He kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and protection. When they parted, she nodded. I'll pack a bag. Carson welcomed Willow to his ranch with gruff courtesy. His wife, Clara, was more openly friendly, perhaps influenced by Willow's care of young Billy. They gave her a small room off the kitchen, while Zachary remained in the bunkhouse. For 3 days, life settled into a new routine. Zachary worked the ranch by day and spent evenings with Willow on Carson's porch. Clara asked about Willow's remedies, and soon the two women were exchanging knowledge about healing herbs and home treatments. On the 4th day, Sheriff Davis rode up to the ranch. Hammond's left town, he announced without preamble. Headed to Tucson, according to his wife. Took most of their savings. She's beside herself. And the others? Carson asked. Quieted down once Hammond left. Seems he was stirring most of the pot. Davis turned to Willow. Your cabin's fine, Miss Lawson. I've had Deputy Martinez keeping an eye on it. Thank you, Sheriff, Willow said. That's very kind. Davis shrugged. Just doing my job. Town needs healing more than hatred. He cleared his throat. Which brings me to another matter. Doc Peterson in Phoenix is looking to set up a proper infirmary here in Willow Creek. Wants to know if you'd consider working with him, Miss Lawson. Says your herbal knowledge would complement his medical training. Willow's surprise was evident. Me? Work with a real doctor? His words were skilled healer. Actually. Davis smiled slightly. Seems Billy's arm made quite an impression when he visited last month. Zachary looked at Willow, seeing the hope blooming in her eyes. That sounds like a fine opportunity, he said softly. I need to think about it, Willow said. Talk it over. Davis nodded. Of course. He's coming through in 2 weeks' time. He tipped his hat and turned to go, then paused. Oh, and Miss Lawson? Mrs. Patterson asked if you'd call on her. Her daughter's expecting, and the morning sickness is fierce. Thought you might have something to help. After the sheriff left, Zachary found Willow in Carson's garden, her hands trembling slightly. You all right? He asked gently. She looked up at him, wonder in her face. It's really changing, isn't it? After all this time. You're being seen for who you truly are. He took her hands. It's about time. 2 weeks later, Willow returned to her cabin, though Zachary still rode out every evening to check on her. Dr. Peterson arrived as scheduled and was impressed with Willow's knowledge. They agreed to a partnership. He would build a small infirmary in town, and she would work alongside him 3 days a week. It won't be easy, Dr. Peterson warned her. Some folks will resist. I'm used to resistance, Willow replied with a smile. And it's getting easier to bear. The following Sunday, Zachary again escorted Willow to church. This time, several people greeted her warmly, including Mrs. Patterson, whose daughter was feeling much better thanks to Willow's ginger and mint tea. After the service, Zachary suggested a walk by Willow Creek itself, the small stream that gave the town its name. As they followed the meandering water, he seemed unusually quiet. You're thinking hard about something, Willow observed. Zachary smiled. You know me well already. I pay attention to people I care about. He stopped beneath a cottonwood tree, taking both her hands in his. Willow Lawson, these past months have been the best of my life. I came to Willow Creek looking for work and found so much more. Her heart quickened. Zachary, I love you, he said simply. Your strength, your kindness, your refusal to become bitter despite everything you've endured. I want to build a life with you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. I'm not a wealthy man, but Carson's offered me a partnership in his South Range. It's good land, enough for a small herd of our own and a proper house. I can think of no one I'd rather share it with. Tears filled Willow's eyes. Are you asking me to marry you? I am. He held the ring between them. Will you? Yes, she whispered. Oh, Zachary, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her close, sealing their promise with a kiss as the creek bubbled beside them and the cottonwood leaves danced overhead. They married that autumn, with Carson standing as Zachary's best man and, surprisingly, Clara Carson as Willow's matron of honor. The ceremony was small but well attended. Even Mrs. Holloway came, bringing a homemade quilt as a peace offering. Dr. Peterson's infirmary opened the following spring, with Willow's herbal remedies prominently displayed alongside his medical supplies. Young women from surrounding farms began to seek Willow's advice, and she took on an apprentice, Billy Davis's sister, who showed a natural talent for healing. One evening, 5 years after Zachary first walked into Hammond's store, he and Willow sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset. Their 3-year-old daughter, Hope, played with wooden blocks on a blanket at their feet, while Willow cradled their infant son, Thomas, named not for the sheriff's son, but for Zachary's father. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been?" Willow asked, leaning against her husband's shoulder. "If I hadn't come to Willow Creek?" Zachary considered. "Sometimes, but I believe we would have found each other somehow." Willow smiled. "The quiet cowboy and the town trouble." "I never saw trouble," Zachary reminded her, brushing a kiss against her temple. "I saw the woman behind the rumors." "I still do." Hope looked up at her parents, presenting a lopsided structure of blocks. "Look, Papa, a house." "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Zachary said, lifting her onto his lap. "Strong and true, just like you." As the last light faded from the sky, Willow looked around at her family, at the life she'd never dared dream possible in those lonely years, and felt a peace that went bone deep. The whispers had faded, replaced by respect and even friendship. Her healing hands now brought life and relief instead of suspicion. And through it all, Zachary remained her steady partner, the quiet cowboy who had seen her true self when no one else would look past the rumors. "I love you," she whispered. His arm tightened around her shoulders. "And I love you. Always will." Hope nestled against her father's chest. Thomas sighed in his sleep, and the desert stars appeared one by one above their home, bearing silent witness to a love that had overcome the harshest of judgments to bloom in the wild heart of Arizona.